After the award-heavy run of 1985 and 1986, you might expect 1987 to be packed with gold medals and sizzlers from start to finish. But not quite. This is where Zzap 64 gets a bit strange. The gold medals almost disappear for a while. Some issues go surprisingly quiet. And by June, the letters page was literally asking, "Gold medals gone?" So 1987 has a different feel. Shorter, patchier, slightly odd, but weaker? Not necessarily. Welcome back to the cheeky Commodore Gamer channel, and let's crack on with January 1987, and one very lonely Sizzler. Hit like, subscribe, and all that good stuff, and let's see what 1987 had to offer. Yes, January proves that point straight away. After the award avalanche of 1986, Zzap came back from Christmas with no gold medal and just one Sizzler. Not exactly a triumphant trumpet fanfare, but I suppose the Ludlow lot were still recovering from the festivities. Tongue-in-cheek though, there is probably a more boring explanation. The big Christmas releases had already been dealt with, and the next wave of C64 heavyweights was still sitting in previews, adverts, and news pages rather than the review section. The one game that broke through though was this one then. The Bard's Tale, a huge disc-only RPG from Interplay and Ariolasoft, written by Michael Cranford and set in the city of Scarabray. You created a party of adventurers, chose their classes, explored the city, visited taverns, temples, shops, and healers, then headed into dungeons for turn-based battles against all sorts of fantasy nasties. As a kid with only a dataset, this was one I once again respected from a distance. I always wanted a disc drive, and games like this were exactly why. Zzap clearly saw the scale of it with the magic, character progression, big city, loads of monsters, and enough adventuring to keep you role-playing game fans busy for ages. They give it 94% overall, so January may only have one Sizzler, but at least it wasn't a token one. In fact, this was a bloody good start to 1987, if you ask me. So January 1987 is about as lean as the Zzap Award months get. One Sizzler, no gold medal, and already a clear sign that this year wasn't going to be another constant awards parade like 1986. But it isn't a bad start. The Bard's Tale is serious, substantial, and if you were into RPGs and lucky enough to own a disc drive, it was a very strong way to open the year. February though is miles busier, but, spoiler alert, still no gold medal, just a lot more games worthy of that legendary Sizzler badge. We're better to kick off a list of superb Sizzlers than with Gauntlet, the Atari dungeon crawler with the warrior, Valkyrie, wizard and elf, endless accidental shooting of food, treasure grabbing, monster generators, and the pressure of having to keep moving before the screen filled up with enemies. I loved this game as a kid and played it regularly with my brother. We'd argue quite a bit though because he'd run one way and I'd run the other, and obviously this wasn't split screen, so we actually had to work together. Good luck with that one. It's this way! The C64 version was never going to recreate the full arcade experience, obviously. I mean, for a start, the coin-op was built around 4-player madness, speed, noise, and people shouting over each other in front of the cabinet. But the home version still captured the basic loop of exploration, collect keys and potions, grabbing as much treasure as possible, protecting the food, destroying the generators, and trying not to get too overwhelmed in the process. Zzap gave it 93%, which was a very good score to be honest, but I think we'll all agree that this was definitely a very good conversion of a massive arcade name, and a very good start to February. February changes pace a fair bit now with Moonmist, another Infocom text adventure, this one written by Stu Galley and Jim Lawrence. You arrive at Tresillian Castle, invited by your friend Tamara, who believes the place is being haunted by the so-called White Lady. So naturally, instead of doing the sensible thing and leaving immediately, you start investigating. There's no flashy graphics because it's Infocom. We get that very familiar grey screen and white text, but the strength of games like this was in the writing, the atmosphere, the clues, and the parser, which gave Infocom titles a level of interaction that felt advanced compared with many adventures at the time. The clever bit is that Moonmist has different mystery variations, so the culprit, treasure and solution could change depending on the version of the story you were playing. Zzap gave it 91%, and it shows they were still willing to reward writing and atmosphere even in an issue with bigger arcade names grabbing attention. A niche Sizzler, maybe, but a classy one, all the same. Next is Silicon Dreams, another adventure game but with a completely different flavour to Moonmist. This was Level 9 science fiction trilogy, bringing together Snowball, Return to Eden and The Worm in Paradise in one package. So instead of one adventure you were getting 3 linked stories, a colony ship in danger, the planet Eden, and then a much stranger future society built around that world. Nice! Text adventure overload, here we go then. Level 9 were often seen as Britain's answer to Infocom, and you can see why, as I must admit their games were ambitious, text heavy, and usually much bigger than they first appeared, although this version also added graphics alongside the text. Zzap gave it 90%, but it definitely appeared that the Ludlow legends definitely enjoyed these text adventures. However, even the high scores probably wouldn't convert any of you who already hated text adventures. But as value and ambition go, this was a strong little package indeed. Retrospectively, I'm glad Zzap rated these games seriously, because their reviews definitely nudged me towards playing more of them as a kid. I think Zork was the first one I ever played, and once that style clicked, games like Silicon Dreams became much easier to appreciate. Next up is Escape from Singe's Castle, also known as Dragon's Lair Part 2. And the Dragon's Lair name was always going to turn heads because most of us had at least seen or had a quick go on the original arcade game, with its Don Bluth cartoon animation and laserdisc wizardry. Dragon's Lair 2 Time Warp was much rarer to find in the arcades, at least in my experience, but by this point we all knew roughly what we were letting ourselves in for. Dirk the Daring, dramatic animation, split-second timing, and death arriving without the slightest apology. The Commodore 64 version though was never going to be the arcade game squeezed onto tape. It was effectively rebuilt into a different kind of game based around Singe's Castle rather than the later Time Warp arcade sequel. So instead of flowing laserdisc animation, you get separate arcade-style screens where Dirk has to survive traps, enemies, route learning, timing, and quite a lot of dying. Actually, loads of dying. Even getting past the whirlpool sections was tough as nails. It still has that Dragon's Lair presence though. The characters are large, the screens are colourful, and Rob Hubbard's music gives it far more atmosphere than it might otherwise have had. I know Hubbard gets mentioned a lot in these Zzap videos, but that's because he was a legend, and still is. And the more of these games I cover, the more you realise just how many classics he scored. Zzap gave it 90%, which feels understandable if you enjoy this very specific trial and error style, although I can imagine plenty of players getting seriously frustrated during the learning process. And yes, this is the review Zzap accidentally chopped in half, so it appears again in March, which initially confused me. But for our counts, this is a February Sizzler only, and I'll explain why when we get to next month's issue. A fair Sizzler then, but definitely a very particular taste. Did you stick with it, or did Dirk's repeated deaths send you over the edge? Let us know in the comments. Next for February is Park Patrol, and after dungeons, castles and text adventures, this was a very welcome change of pace, and also a very addictive game I enjoyed playing as a kid. Originally created by Tony and Go for Activision, Park Patrol puts you in the role of head parkie, trying to stop a pleasant day out from becoming an insurance claim. Tourists keep dropping rubbish, swimmers need rescuing, turtles block your route, ants steal your food, and the lake is full of things that obviously miss the health and safety briefing. It starts off looking like a daft little litter-picking game, then suddenly you're watching your energy, checking the water, dodging hazards, grabbing bonus points, and all that malarkey. I always quietly wondered why a public park was much more stressful than some military operation games I was playing at the time, but jokes aside, it was very addictive even if it was frantic in places. Zzap called it a cute and highly original arcade-style collect-em-up, praising the colourful graphics, 5 boppy tunes, and very addictive gameplay. And because Firebird had it out at £1.99, I think we were all especially impressed with the value at the time. This, along with Thrust, were probably some of the best budget games I owned from Firebird as a kid. Zzap gave it 94%, which is a massive score for a budget re-release, but Paw Patrol has exactly the sort of bright, addictive, slightly oddball quality they love rewarding. A strong sizzler, and definitely one of February's nicest surprises. February's final sizzler is They Stole a Million from Ariola Soft, and this is a very different sort of crime game, but definitely one I think you'll all enjoy. Check out the channel for the full review on this. In a nutshell though, rather than running around blasting guards like in something more like a modern game, Payday, you're the criminal mastermind planning the actual job itself. You pick the target, hire the crew, buy the kit, study the layout, work out the route, then send everyone in and hope your perfect little robbery doesn't collapse because Big Dave has wandered into trouble near a locked door. That's the clever appeal with this one, and a lot of the fun comes before the robbery even starts out, because once the plan is moving, you're partly watching your own decision play out in front of your eyes. Some of you, I can imagine, love that lean back and see if it works side of it, even if most of us probably spent half the time getting caught. Zzap gave it 90%, and it's easy to understand the score when I actually look back at this little classic. It was original, tense, strategic, and felt more of a mature game than another straight arcade shooter. Not the flashiest February sizzler, but definitely one of the most unusual. A final word of wisdom, guys. Remember, organising a robbery badly on a Commodore 64 is still probably safer than trying it in real life. So February is a much healthier month than January. Well, for a start it had 6 sizzlers. Still no gold medal though. Gauntlet had the big arcade name. Paw Patrol was the surprise high scorer. Moonmist and Silicon Dream kept the text adventure lovers happy. They Stole a Million had planning and crime, which was very unique. And Escape from Sinji's Castle gave us a Dragon's Lair sequel with a small magazine layout disaster attached, which we've already still yet to explain. Alas, the gold medal drought continues, and March was even leaner. In fact, it only gives us one sizzler again. Oh, plus the review Zzap accidentally chopped in half. So yeah, March's only sizzler was Mutants from Ocean Software, with music by the brilliant Fred Gray. And honestly, this Sid tune could have earned a sizzler on its own. The idea behind it is brilliantly strange. There's an interstellar war going on. Mutants are being used as biological weapons, and you're sent into a teleporter ring to collect the pieces of a self-destruct mechanism hidden around a mutant breeding colony. Where did they come up with these ideas back in the 80s? Sounds good though, so far. I agree with the Zzap review, which seemed taken by just how strange it looked, describing it as a shooter with real psychedelia vibes, alien patterns, bold use of colour, and some excellent explosions. It is still a shoot-em-up, but it has more going on than just flying left, firing, and hoping for the best. You're choosing weapons, tackling different mutant pens, and trying to survive long enough to get the mechanism together. They gave it 90%, with especially high marks for graphics, presentation, and addictiveness. It's probably not one of the first 1987 sizzlers people name now, but it has a definite identity, a cracking soundtrack, and that slightly weird ocean confidence. March was another surprisingly thin month for awards, but Mutants gives it something worth talking about. Oh yes, as mentioned, Escape from Sinji's Castle popped up again in March, which initially really confused me, but basically and simply, Zzap had just accidentally left part of the February review out, so March simply prints the missing chunk and repeats the same ratings, so for our count it'll stay in February only. March simply prints the missing part of the review after a February layout hiccup. Easily done on a deadline, and it clears up why the game appears twice. I bet you're all as surprised as me at this point, but March was another very quiet award month. Less a firework display of sizzlers, more someone finding one sparkler in a drawer with nothing to light it with. Mutants was the only new sizzler, and the missing bit of Escape from Sinji's Castle, so 3 months into 1987 we still have no gold medal. Surprise, surprise, April doesn't change that either. Why was 1987 taking its time to get going, I wonder? However, we do get one serious sizzler, and this time, the Commodore 64 heads back into military simulation territory. April's only sizzler is Gunship from Microprose, and for a lot of you guys, no doubt this was a big one. It wasn't just a quick hop in a helicopter and start firing sort of game, you were flying an AH-64 Apache through 5 scenarios. From training missions to full combat, dealing with weapons, targeting systems, cockpit instruments, enemy armour, and the uncomfortable possibility of blowing yourself out of the sky because you hadn't learned the controls yet. Let's admit though, for simulator game lovers this was part of the appeal. Gunship immediately felt like a very serious title. It came with that brilliant keyboard overlay tucked inside the box, which instantly made it feel like you were getting something technical and substantial rather than just another game on tape or disc. For anyone who had it back then, that little extra is pure nostalgia. Zzap reviewed the disc version and loved the ambition, the manual, the options, the cockpit view, the realism, and the sheer scale of it. They gave it 94%, and that tells you how highly they rated it. Gunship was a heavyweight sizzler and a real event for simulation fans, but guys, what happened in 1987? I can't get my head around it. 94% but no gold medal is just mental. So April gives us just one award again. I know, I needed to check and double check the whole issues, but at least we can all agree it was a substantial one. Gunship shows how far Commodore 64 simulations had come to the highest degree, especially compared with the simpler helicopter games from the earlier Zzap years. But the pattern was pretty clear so far, with strong individual games but still no gold medals. Fingers crossed for May, that's all I can say, but did any of these games deserve gold medals so far? Let us know in the comments. May starts with Into the Eagle's Nest from Pandora, and this is basically a Gauntlet style game with a wartime infiltration twist. You're sent into a 4-floor Nazi fortress to rescue captured prisoners, find lift passes, collect keys and supplies, then plant explosives and get out before the whole mission falls apart. The important thing is that you can't just run around firing at everything. Ammo is limited, health matters, doors need keys, and some items are useful while others can get you killed if you are too trigger happy. Zzap picked up on the atmosphere straight away when reading through the review. They liked the detailed graphics, the strong sound effects, and the way the enemy soldiers moved around the fortress, giving it more tension than a simple top-down shooter. The review also compared it to the wave of Gauntlet-style games, but felt that this one had enough personality and mission structure to stand out. They gave it 90%, with high marks for graphics, sound, hookability, and value. It's not flashy graphically in my opinion though, however it is tense, nicely paced, usually me trying desperately to find more ammo while searching for the next prisoner. So then, a strong sizzler would you say? I think that this was a good example of a simple idea becoming much more gripping than it first appears. May's second sizzler is Hollywood Hijinx from Infocom and Activision, written by Dave Anderson and Liz Keir-Jones. And yes, by this point we have covered quite a few Infocom adventures, so I understand if another grey screen with white text doesn't exactly make everyone leap out of their chair. But these sizzlers were not being thrown around for the sake of it. Infocom adventures really were superbly written. And Hollywood Hijinx is another good example. Your late Aunt Hildegard and Uncle Buddy have left you a shot at their estate, but only if you can spend the night exploring the mansion and grounds, finding 10 hidden treasures linked to the old film props, showbiz memories, and their very strange lives. Even getting into the house itself can be a puzzle, so this wasn't exactly a quick inheritance claim. Zzap praised the atmosphere, interaction and value, giving it 90% overall. It's lighter and sillier than some of the darker adventures, but still has that Infocom quality, sharp writing, clever puzzles, and moments where you feel like a genius one minute and a complete lemon the next. A good sizzler for adventure fans and a nice change after the shooting, sneaking and fortress work earlier in May. So then guys, May was another small month, but not a dull one. Into the Eagle's Nest sent us sneaking through a Nazi fortress with limited ammo, locked doors, prisoners to rescue, and guards who really didn't want us touching the valuables. Then Hollywood Hijinx took us back to Infocom. Grey screen, white text, and somehow still more personality than half the games with sprites. Still though, no gold medal. And by June, even Zzap's own readers were asking questions. The Gold Medals Gauntlet wasn't just moaning about scores, it was about the state of the C64 market itself. Too many lazy tie-ins, too many rushed conversions, too many games chasing screenshots instead of ideas, and a real worry that imagination was starting to lose out to advertising deadlines. Zzap's response was interesting too, because they treated it as a serious debate about what C64 games should be. So yes, 5 months into 1987, still no gold medal, and even the readers had noticed as well. Right then, let's head into June and see if anything finally shines. June begins with Zenji from Activision, re-released by Firebird for £1.99, and this is a cracking little puzzle game for anyone who enjoys having their brain slowly melted. On screen you've got a maze of blue and yellow track pieces, and your job is to rotate them so the little face can travel from the green source and eventually turn the whole network green. Simple enough to explain, less simple when the timer is ticking down, hazards are moving, and one wrong turn makes the board look like UK roadworks planned by committee. Zzap called it simple in concept, beautifully designed, and surprisingly hard to put down, and that sums up Zenji nicely. It doesn't need flashy graphics, big characters, or a massive storyline. It has one strong idea, adds time pressure, then sits there smugly while you run out of time and have to restart a level you were convinced you'd nearly solved. The scores sum up this story nicely too. Presentation got 91% for being well presented and user-friendly, while hookability hit 92% because it was easy to grasp but hard to leave alone. Lasting appeal came in at 89%, and the big one was value at 97%, with Zzap calling it an awful lot of enjoyment for the lowest possible price. Overall, you can see it got 91%, calling it Firebird's cheapest and best puzzle game. A smart sizzler, and exactly the kind of budget release people loved stumbling across. Give it a whirl, and let me know if you enjoyed this one in the comment section. Next up for June is Zolyx, another Firebird budget release that I'm pretty sure I picked up for a cool £1.99. And yes, another Zzap budget sizzler. It looks painfully plain at first. You see a dot, a border, a few angry pixels, and sound effects that make your telly sound poorly. But then you play it, and it's bloody addictive indeed. It's basically another QueDex variation, also known as sticks, where you edge out, draw lines, claim territory, and try not to have your trail smashed to bits. I've always liked this style of game, even Gal's Panic in the arcades, although that might have had less to do with strategy and more to do with the promise of badly pixelated boobies if you revealed the correct areas on the screen. Zzap knew it looked and sounded basic, giving it 35% for graphics and 29% for sound. But 97% for hookability and 97% for value says it all. For £1.99, Zolyx was cheap, tense, addictive, and fully deserving of that 90% sizzler. June turns into a bit of a puzzle month then. Zenji for the more thoughtful, brain-tangling side of things. And Zolyx for, well, whatever we're officially calling that. QueDex, sticks, territory boxing, pixel baiting madness. Either way, two very different sizzlers, and both showing that 1987 still had plenty of clever ideas without needing explosions every 5 seconds. And that brings us to the halfway point of the year. Plenty of sizzlers, plenty of strong C64 games, but still not a single gold medal from Zzap. July doesn't fix that either, but it does bring in a game where plenty of people would probably say, hang on, how did that not get one? And yes, July starts with Wizball, and this is where the lack of a gold medal, as mentioned, starts to look a bit daft. This was sensible software with John Herr, Chris Yates, and a superb Martin Galway soundtrack, and Zzap gave it 96%, calling it the finest release of the year so far. The idea is brilliantly odd. Wizworld has had all its colour drained away, so Wiz bounces through these strange alien landscapes while his cat, Nifter, collects coloured droplets to restore each level. Explaining it out loud sounds like someone's been sniffing the load screen psychedelia, but in play, it's blooming fantastic. The controls do take a bit of learning because you're not just moving and shooting, you're bouncing, drifting, stabilising, upgrading, swapping to the cat and slowly getting a grip of it all. And until you get that first power up to stabilise everything, it's nothing short of Cauldron 2 frustration. And yes, there are still some Wizball haters out there which frankly borders on a blasphemy. For me, this is the first massive "how was that not gold" moment. A 96% Sizzler and an all-time C64 classic. July's second Sizzler is World Class Leaderboard from Access, scoring 94%, and by this point, the Leaderboard series had pretty much become the standard for Commodore 64 Golf. This version added 3 accurate recreations of real courses, plus the tougher Gauntlet Country Club, and it kept that brilliant swing system where timing, club choice, wind and snap all mattered. Now, golf on the Commodore 64 was never going to be explosions and aliens every 2 seconds, but it was the sort of game me and my brother would be completely enthralled with as kids. Even watching courses draw in is very nostalgic. Judging distance, trying not to overshoot the green, and watching my brother's crap shots land in the water was brilliant fun. The slower pace of games like this encapsulated the competitive and strangely tense gaming days of my youth. Zzap called it the apex in golfing simulations, with 95% presentation, 94% hookability, and 92% value. And then on the same page, they gave Strike 8%, just to remind everyone what a sports disaster looked like. For me, World Class Leaderboard absolutely earns its Sizzler. It's polished, tactical, and probably still the C64 golf game most people remember first. I must play Strike sometime and give that one a review. But anyway, July gives us 2 cracking Sizzlers, and they could hardly be more different. Wizball is the one everyone argues about because 96% and no gold medal is pretty mind-blowing, like Zzap left the badge in a drawer by mistake. Then you've got World Class Leaderboard, much quieter by comparison but brilliantly put together, and possibly the C64 golf game most people still picture first. 7 months in, Zzap still hasn't handed out the gold medal, but August finally changes that. The gold medal badge comes back out, and this time it goes to a game that absolutely earned it. August, finally, 1987 gets its first gold medal, and no messing about. It goes to Head Over Heels from Ocean, with a massive 98%. Designed by John Rittman and Bernie Drummond, this is isometric arcade adventuring at its finest. You control Head and Heels, 2 little weirdos with completely different talents. Head can jump higher and fire donuts once equipped, while Heels is quicker and can carry objects around. Separately, they're useful, but together they become the real puzzle-solving machine. And this game is huge. Over 300 rooms, lots of strange planets, hidden routes, awkward jumps, and usually, in my case, one silly mistake which will undo ages of progress. The lack of a save option is brutal, but that was the 80s, and gamers weren't soft like they are now. Zzap called it an all-time classic, and even after 7 months without a gold medal, this was absolutely the right game to end the drought. No argument from me, a superb C64 classic. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. After the bright cartoon brilliance of Head Over Heels, August swerved straight into the lurking horror from, guess who? Yes, Infocom. A 90% Sizzler, and basically horror done with nothing but text and your own imagination doing the damage. You're a student trapped at GUE Tech during a snowstorm, trying to finish a thesis only to discover hidden tunnels, strange noises, and something deeply unpleasant under the campus. And because it's Infocom, one early puzzle has you making Chinese food in a microwave and giving it to a hungry hacker. So yes, Lovecraftian horror, but with student catering. That odd mix of humour and dread is what gives it character. No monster sprites, no cheap gore, just strong writing, gloomy atmosphere, and the horrible feeling that typing "examine everything" might still not save you. Zzap gave it 94% for atmosphere and 90% overall. Not for everyone, but for text adventure fans, this was a smart, unsettling Sizzler. Next is Defender of the Crown, and I'll be honest, this feels like it should have been another gold medal. Zzap gave it 94%, which is still a brilliant score, but this was one of those games that made me genuinely stop and stare at it in a slightly confused way, as if to say, hang on, are we actually allowed to have graphics like this? It's still a game we all talk about as being a bona fide classic. Cinemaware were going for the whole interactive movie thing, with the Saxons, Normans, castles, jousting, raids, sword fights, sieges, rescuing maidens, and a big medieval map of Britain where you're trying to claw back territory and build your power. Now, yes, the Commodore 64 version couldn't fully match the Amiga showpiece, but for an 8-bit machine, it still had huge atmosphere. Richard Joseph's music helped massively too, giving the whole thing that grand, dramatic feel. The strategy itself is fairly simple, and some of the action sections are stronger than others, but as an experience it felt special. Defender of the Crown was absolutely gold medal material, yet a very highly scoring 94% Sizzler. From one 94% Sizzler to another, August also gives us The Last Ninja from System 3, and at this point Zzap's gold medal standards were starting to feel seriously hard to predict. We've already had Gunship at 94%, Wizball at 96%, world-class Leaderboard at 94%, and now this. So you can see why the "where are the gold medals" question had become a bit of a running theme through 1987. You play Armakuni, the last surviving ninja, working through the island of Lin Fen, fighting guards, collecting objects, solving puzzles, and try not to launch yourself into the nearest bit of water because the jumping parts are fucking impossible sometimes. And yes, let's be fair, the controls could be fiddly. The combat wasn't exactly silky. Picking up items could feel like hard work if not in the exact position, and some of those river jumps probably shorten lives across Britain. But as a total Commodore 64 package, The Last Ninja was massive. The isometric locations, the ninja theme, the atmosphere, the animation, and that brilliant Ben Daglish and Anthony Lee's soundtrack made it pretty epic. Zzap gave it 94%, including 98% for graphics, and I get that score completely. Flawed? Yes. Occasionally infuriating? Absolutely. But iconic? No question. The Last Ninja is another August Sizzler with a very serious argument for gold medal status, even if Zzap had already handed one out to head over heels earlier in the issue. August is easily the strongest month of 1987 so far, and after all that waiting, Zzap finally got the gold medal badge back out for head over heels, absolutely deserved, and no complaints from me. But the mad thing is, even after that, August still had games you could argue were gold medal material. Defender of the Crown had the presentation, atmosphere, and big, look at what the C64 can do energy. While The Last Ninja brought System 3's huge ninja adventure, stunning locations, superb music, and just enough awkward jumping to make half the country blame their joysticks. Then, sitting in a completely different corner, the lurking horror keeps the adventure fans happy with Infocom, doing creepy campus horror through text, imagination, and microwave Chinese food. Very normal. So after 7 months of asking where the gold medals have gone, August finally wakes the year up in a big way, and September keeps that momentum going with another gold medal, some strong Sizzlers, and one of Epix's most memorable Commodore 64 releases. September starts with Zynaps from Houston, and after August's big hitters, we're straight back into hard as nails, sideways shoot-em-up territory. You pilot the Scorpion through 12 horizontally scrolling levels, blasting alien waves, grabbing fuel pods, collecting weapon upgrades, and trying to survive long enough to reach the next mothership. Simple idea, but Zynaps has that Houston polish, slick presentation, chunky alien backdrops, smart icon use, and some excellent sound effects when the weaponry gets going. The big talking point is the ship movement. There's a bit of inertia to it, so it doesn't just zip around like a paper dart. Some of you loved that weighty feel, others probably blamed it every time they clipped the scenery and got sent back to the start of the level. And yes, no checkpoints is a bit cruel, especially when the game is already difficult enough. Zzap gave it 90%, calling it addictive, slick and irritatingly difficult. That feels about right. Not the biggest name of September, but a tough, polished Houston shooter, and a strong sizzler to get the month moving. Next is Rebounder from Gremlin, the sequel to Bounder, and I'll be honest, the original was a game I respected more than I enjoyed at times, and if you remember the original review in previous video, that was mainly because it had that wonderful ability to make me feel like I'd been outsmarted by a bouncing tennis ball. This one keeps the same strange idea, and you're still controlling that little infuriating bouncing menace, landing on platforms, avoiding hazards, picking routes and trying not to rebound yourself into yet another stupid death. But Rebounder has more going on, with scrolling in different directions, weapons, armour, bonus squares, crumbling platforms, and even end-of-level bosses. The guys at Zzap called it incredibly addictive, praised the parallax scrolling, the sound effects, and the fact that it quickly becomes very hard to put down. And, okay, admittedly, I can see that. Even if this type of game was basically designed to test my patience one bounce at a time. Some people prefer it to the original because it feels better balanced and more varied, while others think it loses a bit of Bounder's cleaner originality. I'm somewhere in the middle. It's still frustrating, still weird, but definitely more ambitious. Zzap gave it 90%, and as oddball Commodore 64 sequels go, Rebounder, I'll concede, probably earned its Sizzler. Now, September brings out the big badge for California games, and after waiting most of the year for gold medals, Zzap suddenly gives us another belter. Epix had already done summer games, winter games and world games in my previous Zzap videos, but this one felt completely different. There's no stadiums, no national anthems, no serious Olympic faces, just the sponsors, surfing, BMX, halfpipe, footbag, flying disc, and roller skating. Basically, the 80s had put on sunglasses and wandered onto the Commodore 64, and we loved it. Some of you will have had this on the Atari Lynx too. Ah, the good old days. The best thing is, nearly every event has its own little personality. Surfing was all about staying on the wave. BMX was full of stunts, and in my case, falling off a lot. Footbag needed irritatingly precise timing, and roller skating was mostly trying not to make the poor girl twat her head against the floor. Zzap gave it 97%, with 98% for hookability, and called it the apex of computer sports gaming at the time. Hard to argue really, colourful, competitive, packed with variety, and brilliant with friends taking turns. California Games fully deserved its gold medal. A late 80s Commodore 64 classic, but was it the best sports or events game Epix ever released? Let us know in the comments. Next is Guild of Thieves from Magnetic Scrolls, and this follows on nicely from the pawn, although for some reason this was always the one I preferred. Maybe it was the thief theme, maybe the setting, or maybe I just like the idea of being sent out to rob half of Karovnia as some sort of dodgy final exam. You play an apprentice trying to join the Reknort Rangers, and to prove yourself you've got to explore the island, raid the castle, solve puzzles, collect valuables, and eventually deal with the Bank of Karovnia. Like the pawn, it had strong writing, a clever parser, and those impressive illustrated screens that made Magnetic Scrolls adventures feel a bit more luxurious than the usual text-only approach. The downside, of course, was the loading, because on the C64, those lovely pictures did not exactly appear in a hurry. I still love this on the Amiga though, superb game I sometimes return to for nostalgia's sake. Zzap gave it 90% though, praising the puzzles, presentation and imagination. Not for arcade-only gamers, obviously. But for adventure fans, Guild of Thieves was another classy sizzler. And to be honest, the Magnetic Scroll game I always warm to more. September's final sizzler is Paws from Software Projects, and this is definitely the oddball of the month. A strange little cartoon chase game that apparently began life with a bit of Roadrunner DNA in it, which suddenly explains quite a lot. You play as Captain Rover Postrong, a dog sent to catch space griffins on the moon. Sounds stupid, doesn't it? Using a collection of ridiculous gadgets, traps and weapons. It's basically Space Pest Control with a Rob Hubbard soundtrack, and that soundtrack was awesome. The game itself is simple, maybe even repetitive, but it has that fast, daft, Saturday morning cartoon feel, where you could load it up for 5 minutes then somehow go back for another go. There are surface sections, underground mines, little sub-games, and enough weirdness to make it stand apart from the more serious shooters and adventures around it. Zzap gave it 90%, praising its humour, presentation, and unusual style. I can see why some people now think it was overrated, but it's not boring, it's not another clone, and it definitely has personality. A quirky Sizzler to end September. Daft, noisy, memorable, and very C64. September was where 1987 finally started to feel like it had found its stride. California Games took the gold medal and gave Epix another huge C64 hit, while Zynaps brought the polished Houston Arcade Challenge. And Rebounder added another tough, stylish action game to the issue. Guild of Thieves kept the adventure crowd more than satisfied, and Paws rounded the month off with something far stranger, sillier, and harder to forget. After a patchy first half of the year, September felt like the moment 1987 finally clicked into gear, and October didn't ease off either. Another gold medal, 2 unusual silver medals, and one of the most famous arcade conversions of the entire year. October, and 1987 opened with a big one. Bobble, Firebird's Commodore 64 conversion of Tato's arcade classic, and Zzap gave it a gold medal with 97%. And honestly, fair enough. This was the sort of arcade conversion us Commodore 64 fans were screaming for. All 100 screens, the 2-player mode intact, loads of bonuses, hidden tricks, extend letters, lightning bubbles, water bubbles, and that final confrontation with the giant cave dweller still squeezed in. We obviously all know this one, but if somehow you've never heard of it, 2 characters, Bub and Bob, trap enemies in bubbles, burst them, grab fruit, and move on. But the magic was in how quickly that simple idea became tense, funny, greedy, and slightly murderous, especially with 2 players, where teamwork usually lasted about 10 seconds before someone nicked the bonus you were obviously going for. And this is not just nostalgia talking either. I still play Bobble with my wife now, and it's just as addictive as ever. Zzap loved it too. Presentation scored 92%, hookability a massive 97%, lastability 91%, and a massive overall 97%, praising how much of the arcade game survived on the Commodore 64. The music could burrow into your skull after a while, but that's what we all remember about this game. Cute graphics, memorable music, sharp design, and a 2-player mode that could swallow entire evenings. Bobble fully deserved the gold medal. A superb conversion, and still one of the Commodore 64's great arcade success stories. Next is Red L.E.D. from Starlight, and this is one of October's more unusual Sizzlers. The plot has Earth running out of resources, so you're sent into this cosmic grid of 37 hexagons, with each one representing a world that needs liberating. On the ground it becomes a fast isometric arcade adventure, where you guide different droids around acid lakes, slopes, waterfalls, enemy robots, and energy pods, trying to open the exit and keep the grid moving from left to right. The clever bit is that the droids all behave differently, so it's not just a case of charging around and hoping for the best. One handles slopes better, one deals with acid, and another can take more punishment. Zzap gave it 93%, praising the graphics, speed, structure, and long-term challenge. As you can see here, it looks slick, moves quickly, and is more than just a basic collect and exit sort of game. It probably isn't one of the 1987 Sizzlers people even remember these days, unless I suppose you'd played it before. But Red L.E.D. definitely had a certain ambition, and in a year full of safer releases, that counts for a lot. Then we get Mega Apocalypse from Martech, programmed by Simon Nicol with music by Rob Hubbard. And yes, this is very much in the same family as Crazy Comet, which I really enjoyed playing on a livestream not too long back. Very addictive indeed. This is arcade shooting with very little dicking about. You blast the hell out of moons, planets, and anything else drifting around the screen while grabbing missiles, shields, extra lives, speed-ups, and rotation motors. That rotation system is actually one of the great features in this game, because you can angle your ship and fire in different directions rather than just shooting straight up the screen. Zzap, as we see here, enjoyed the pace and presentation. They praised the music, the speech, the two-player options, and how frantic it all becomes once the planets start growing, flashing, and charging around the screen. They gave it 90%, and I definitely back that score up, as it's very good indeed. It's fast, loud, polished, and difficult enough to keep you coming back. A strong Sizzler then. Maybe not the game you'd spent months mastering, but for a loud, fast Commodore 64 arcade blast, it absolutely earned its Sizzler. October also gave us B-24 Flight Simulator from SSI, and this was a different type from the usual SSI games we'd already covered. We'd had dungeon crawlers, strategy titles, and serious military games, but this one puts you directly in the cockpit of a World War II B-24 Liberator. You had to fly bombing raids, deal with takeoff, navigation, formation flying, bombing runs, fuel, flak, enemy fighters, engine damage, and then, if you'd not made a complete mess of it, trying to land the thing again. Zzap's review was quite honest about the presentation. The cockpit display was basic, the landscape was plain, and the plane itself was hardly bursting with animation. But we're more interested in the atmosphere, the awesome documentation these games had, and the way the aircraft actually handled. You need to keep a close eye on your instruments, adjusting power, opening bomb doors, checking coordinates, managing damage, all while trying to keep the mission together. Zzap gave it 90% with 95% for rules, which was a strange criteria I'd never seen before. I guess that tells you exactly what type of game this is. You needed patience, you definitely needed the manual, and you 100% needed to be in the right sort of mind to tackle a game of this magnitude. This is one of those Sizzlers where I respect the score more than I'd personally rush to load it up for a quick blast. But for serious simulation fans, B-24 Flight Simulator clearly delivered the depth, tension, and commitment they wanted. A respectable Sizzler then, just not one for anyone hoping to wing it with a joystick and blind optimism. Before we move on, I do want to quickly cover the two silver medal games from October. They're not gold medals and they're not standard Sizzlers, so I'm not counting them in the main award tally. But Zzap still gave both of them 90%, and because the silver medal badge appears here, I think they deserve a quick mention in this year's run-through. First is Arcade Classics from Firebird, a £1.99 budget release built around 4 old arcade games: Space Invaders, Asteroids, Snakes, and Space Wars. The whole appeal was that simply early arcade feel which revisited these quick games, the high scores, two-player battles, and that sort of thing you could load up without needing a manual the size of a phone book. Zzap liked the value, the presentation, and the Rob Hubbard soundtrack, which definitely gave the package more life than you might expect from a budget compilation. They did point out that the conversions weren't perfect, and a couple of these games really needed 2 players to get the most out of them, but for £1.99 it wasn't a bad little bundle. You were getting a little arcade collection with decent presentation, a cracking soundtrack, and enough variety to make it feel like good value. A silver medal then, not one of the huge 1987 names, but still worth acknowledging. The other October silver medal goes to Revenge of the Mutant Camels 2 from Llamasoft, although most people now tend to know it as Return of the Mutant Camels. And yes, it's another Jeff Minter game, so straight away you know this is going to have its own personality. You control a mutant camel, move across horizontally scrolling landscapes, hold down fire, collect weapons and shields, and deal with wave after wave of strange enemies. Zzap described it as a typical Minter game, odd, characterful, easy to get into, and full of offbeat humour. They also felt that this was an improvement over the earlier Camel games with a better weapon system, improved control, and a stronger overall feel. The graphics were large and very much in Minter's style. The sound was simple but effective, and the action was strange without being hard to understand. That is probably why Zzap gave it 90%. I'll be honest, Minter games are always a bit of a world of their own. Some people absolutely love them, some people bounce straight off them. but they were certainly never bland. A strange silver medal then, but a memorable one, and definitely worth covering before we leave October behind. October was another busy month. Bobble takes the gold medal and absolutely deserves it. Mega Apocalypse, Red L.E.D and B24 Flight Simulator gave the issue a good spread of arcade action and simulation. While the 2 silver medals make the awards list slightly messier than usual. November keeps things simpler. No gold medal this time, but 4 Sizzlers, including a beat-em-up conversion, a fighting sequel, and one of the strangest looking games of the year. November started with Renegade from Imagine, the C64 conversion of Tato's arcade beat-em-up, and this was a pretty big name for the machine. You play Wayne, which I never actually knew until researching these games in more depth, heading through New York's roughest streets to rescue Luxe. That means gangs, bikers, whip-wielding enemies, bosses, and plenty of close-range punch-and-kick violence. Crunchy. Zzap were impressed by how close it felt to the arcade version. The title screen and music were almost identical. The enemies attacked as a group, and the action had that scrappy feel a beat-em-up needed. The controls were a bit strange at first, using joystick and keys, which was a bit mental. But once you adjusted, there was a good game here. Zzap gave it 90% overall, calling it a polished and satisfying conversion. For C64 beat-em-up fans in 1987, Renegade was a strong start to November. Next was International Karate Plus, and this is one of the easiest Sizzlers of the whole year to defend because it's probably the mightiest karate-style beat-em-up of the bunch. Archer McLean took the original International Karate idea and improved it brilliantly. The big change was the 3-fighter setup instead of the usual one-on-one format, and that made every bout feel more unpredictable and far more entertaining. There was always that third opponent moving in, stealing points, interrupting attacks, or getting caught by a perfectly timed, completely accidental kick to the teeth. The animation was superbly smooth, the controls felt sharp, and the whole thing had that competitive quality where a quick match could easily turn into half an hour. And of course, Rob Hubbard's music was superb yet again. The maestro of the Sid chip returns. Zzap gave it 93% overall, with 95% for presentation, 94% for hookability, and 82% for lastability. Personally, I'd put IK Plus amongst the very best fighting games on the Commodore 64. But what about you? Was this your favourite C64 fighter, or would you go for Way of the Exploding Fist, Barbarian, Bangkok Knights, or something else entirely? Let me know in the comments. Then came Morpheus from Houston, designed by the brilliant Andrew Braybrook, and this was one of November's more interesting Sizzlers, although not one I'd call easy to get into. The game took place across 50 sub-universes with ithers, orbitals, and a central nucleus to destroy. You docked at base, bought weapons and systems, deployed your ship, earned money, upgraded, and tried to push further in. Zzap praised the technical side, especially the graphics, colour use, atmosphere, and structure. This wasn't just a simple blasting game, it had systems, progression, and a lot of thought behind it. But that was also where some of us may have struggled. You needed the instructions, patience, and a willingness to let the game slowly make sense. Zzap gave it 90% overall, praising the technical quality, atmosphere, and ambition. I understand the admiration, but personally, I found Morpheus easy to respect than enjoy. Clever? Yes. Memorable? Probably. Pick up and play friendly? Absolutely not. November's final Sizzler was QueDex from Thalamus, created by Stavros Fazoulis, and after Sanxion and Delta, this was a very different sort of game from the Finnish legend. No spaceships, no big blasting, no Martin Galway soundtrack trying to melt your speakers, just a bowl, 10 different planes, and a game determined to expose every weakness in your joystick control. The idea was simple: guide the ball to the goal before the timer ran out, but each plane had its own twist, with teleporters, hidden amulets, keys, conveyor belts, disappearing floors, and other little problems waiting to ruin your progress. Zzap gave it 92% overall, with 95% for presentation and 94% for graphics, calling it original and superbly implemented. It took me a while to get my head around, but I agree, QueDex was clever, polished, and very thalamus. A strong Sizzler, and a decent way to close November. So November had no gold medal, but it still had some bloody good games. IK Plus was the easy standout for me and probably one of the safest Sizzler decisions of the whole year. Renegade brought in the arcade beat-em-up action. Morpheus gave us Andrew Braybrook doing something more ambitious and harder to get into. And QueDex rounded things off with a clever thalamus puzzler that punished anyone who thought controlling a ball would be easy. So smaller than October, yes, but certainly not weak. December though was where 1987 went for the big finish. Gold medals, a stack of Sizzlers, a couple of odd award entries with no percentage rating, and one final reminder that while 1987 took its time to get going, it certainly didn't run out of steam at the end. December started with Maniac Mansion from Lucasfilm Games, and this was a major one for adventure fans. Instead of typing commands and trying to guess the exact phrase the game wanted, Maniac Mansion used the Scum interface, where you selected verbs and objects on screen. On the Commodore 64, that made it feel far more approachable than many traditional adventures. You had the strange mansion, the weird Edison family, multiple kids to choose from, different routes through the game, and the dark cartoon humour running underneath it all. It still had puzzles, danger, and plenty of ways to mess things up, but it felt less intimidating than staring at a blank command line, wondering why the game hated your wording. Zzap gave it 93% overall. I reckon plenty of you would have happily scored it higher. Maniac Mansion wasn't just another adventure game with a friendlier menu, it helped move the genre forward, years before Monkey Island made that Lucasfilm style truly legendary. A superb Sizzler, and a very strong start to December. But where would you rank it among C64 adventure games? Right near the top, or do you still prefer the old parser-styled adventures? Then came Buggy Boy, and this was one of December's gold medals. This was the Commodore 64 conversion of Tatsumi's arcade racer, and it did a brilliant job of keeping that bright, bouncy coin-op feel. You drove across wide tracks, collecting flags, hitting gates, avoiding rocks, logs, trees and walls, and trying to keep the buggy moving while the course constantly threw obstacles at you. The important thing was that it felt good to play. Fast, colourful, responsive and rewarding without being too fussy. It was easy to get into, but still had enough going on to keep you chasing a better score. And this is where good arcade conversions really mattered. The C64 had its fair share of disappointing ports. But Buggy Boy didn't feel like a miserable compromise, it felt like someone had actually understood why the arcade game was fun in the first place. Zzap gave it 97% overall, and a gold medal. A cracking gold medal then, and easily one of the best C64 races of 1987. Maybe even one of the best full stop, depending on who you ask. Where would Buggy Boy sit in your own C64 racing game leaderboard? Top 5? Top 3? Or right at the very top? Let me know in the comments. Then we get the unusual one, Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit, or SHOOK, which sounds like I've just thrown up in the bin. Zzap gave it a gold medal, but no regular overall percentage, and to be fair on this occasion, I think that made sense. SHOOK was not really a normal game as such, it was a toolkit for making your own shoot-em-ups, so judging it alongside ordinary releases was never going to be quite the same thing. For C64 owners this was a big deal, especially if you later got it with the Commodore 64C Light Fantastic Pack. For anyone with that bundle, Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit probably carries a very particular nostalgia, because it wasn't just another game in the box, it was the whole toolkit sitting there, inviting you to mess about and make something of your own. You could design sprites, backgrounds, attack waves, sound effects, title screens, and then save your own finished game. Now, let's be honest, most of what we made was probably unfair, broken, or full of enemy patterns that only the person who made it could survive, but that didn't matter. For a lot of us, Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit made game creation feel possible. Zzap recognised that too. No overall score, but a gold medal because it offered something different and genuinely exciting. Did any of you actually finish a shoot-'em-up construction kit game back then? Or did you just create one impossible level, crash into everything and call it a masterpiece? Let us know, because I suspect a lot of us were guilty of that. Next was Russia, and this linked quite nicely back to Germany 1985, which we covered in the earlier Zzap run. This was another serious strategy game, but this time the focus moved to the Eastern Front of World War II with Operation Barbarossa, and the conflict between Germany and the Soviet Union turned into one large campaign. You'd study the map, issue orders, plan several moves ahead, and manage the wider campaign rather than pushing every individual unit around yourself. That gave the game a bigger sense of scale, but it also meant living with the consequences when your plans didn't quite unfold the way you'd hoped. From what other reviewers said, this was a real-time investment. A full campaign could take many hours, and while the joystick-driven interface made it more approachable than some war games, it still needed patience and planning. Zzap gave it 91% overall. For serious wargame fans, this would have been a strong one. After Germany in 1985, Zzap's military history tour continued into Russia and once again. Probably not one to load up when you only had 10 minutes before tea. December also gave us Zigzag from Mirrorsoft, designed by Tony Crowther, and this was a strange but impressive return to form after a few more forgettable releases. The story had you inside the 12th Dimension School of Starflights, hunting 8 crystals before the time limit ran out. In play, that meant exploring a large 3D maze, buying equipment, shooting switches, working out routes, and probably reaching for graph paper before too long. Zzap were impressed by the technical side. The scrolling was smooth, the coloured 3D environments looked striking, and the music and sound effects gave it more atmosphere than you might expect from a maze-based game. Zzap gave it 92% overall, calling it unusual, polished and highly enjoyable. Not one of the biggest names of 1987 now, but still a very strong sizzler, and another reminder of just how broad the Commodore 64 library had become by this point. In the same year, Zzap was rewarding arcade conversions, martial arts games, strategy titles, adventures, construction kits, and then something like Zigzag, which sat somewhere between maze game, shooter and puzzle adventure. That variety is a big part of why the Commodore 64 was so special, and still is so special. Next was Bangkok Nights from System 3, and after International Karate Plus the previous month, this was another reminder that the Commodore 64 was pretty well served for one-on-one fighters. This one took the kickboxing route. You travelled to Bangkok, fought through different opponents, and worked your way up to the championship. Each fighter had their own moves, including high kicks, low kicks, toe stomps, knee attacks, and the wonderfully named Ninja Magic, for when ordinary kickboxing was not enough. Zzap were impressed by the presentation straight away. The fighters were huge, the animation was smooth, the backdrops looked good, and the sound effects had enough impact to make the fights feel more physical. Zzap gave it 90% overall, with 94% for presentation and 93% for graphics. So visually, it definitely made an impression. For me, it doesn't sit above IK+, but that is hardly an insult. A strong fighting game, and a fair sizzler. Did any of you actually prefer this to IK+, or was Archer McLean's classic still the king of C64 fighters? Then we get another December oddity. Computer Scrabble Deluxe from Leisure Genius, and yes, somehow Scrabble managed to sit in the same awards run as Buggy Boy, Maniac Mansion and Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit. That says a lot about the range of C64 software. By late 1987, the game followed the standard board rules, with up to 4 human or computer players, 8 difficulty levels from the computer opponent, and a built-in dictionary based on Chambers' official Scrabble reference books. Zzap also pointed out that the vocabulary contained over 20,000 words, which is useful, because otherwise half the game becomes arguing over whether someone had just made a word up. Zzap gave it a sizzler, but no overall percentage was printed with the review. Not exciting in the usual Zzap sense, but if you wanted Scrabble on the C64, this looked like a serious attempt. And let's be honest, if your family had this loaded up at Christmas, it was probably still less dangerous than getting the actual board out and arguing over the dictionary. December also gave us Nebulus from Houston, and this was one of the real standouts of the month. You control the little green destructor expert Pogo, climbing a series of towers, using lifts, dodging enemies, avoiding hazards, and try not to fall half the level because of one mistimed jump. The rotating tower effect was the bit everyone remembered, and rightly so, because it looked superb on the Commodore 64, but there was a strong game underneath it all as well. It was clever, demanding, addictive, and yes, bloody hard. Zzap gave it 97% overall, and a gold medal, praising both the originality and the way it kept pulling you back in. This is the thing with Nebulus, it could knock you off the tower, waste your progress, and make you mutter at the screen. But you still wanted another go. Nebulus was one of the strongest games of 1987, full stop. A brilliant way to end the year, and proof that the C64 could still surprise people in late 1987. But what did you think? Was Nebulus the right final gold medal of the year, or would you still put Buggy Boy, head over heels, or even Wizball above it? So December 1987 was a huge finish, and after the quieter start to the year, it felt like Zzap was making up for lost time. Buggy Boy got a gold medal, but I'd agree with that. I loved it, and it was one of the best arcade conversions of the year. Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit was the stranger gold medal because it had no normal percentage rating, but as a toolkit rather than a standard game, that made sense. And Nebulus also finished with gold, giving December a very strong end to the year. Then the Sizzlers gave us Maniac Mansion, Russia, Zigzag, Bangkok Nights, and Computer Scrabble Deluxe. So that was Zzap 64's Gold Medals and Sizzlers of 1987. And what a strange year it was. It started with the awards drying up, readers asking where the gold medals had gone, and some issues feeling much quieter than anything we saw in 1986. But by the end, the C64 still delivered RPGs, arcade conversions, text adventures, strategy games, simulations, fighting games, puzzle games, construction kits, and a few games that still stand tall today. Was 1987 as consistent as 1986? No, I don't think it was. But was it weak? Not a chance. It was uneven, definitely, but when the good stuff arrived, it really arrived. So now I want to know what you think. Was Wizball robbed of a gold medal? Was Nebulus the right final gold medal of the year? Was Head Over Heels the best award decision of 1987? Was Maniac Mansion underscored at 93%? And out of all the games covered here, which one would you still load up first today? Let me know in the comments, because this year is definitely going to split opinion. And if you want me to carry on with Zzap's 1988 Gold Medals and Sizzlers, just put 1988 in the comments, so I know there's enough interest. If you enjoyed this trip through Zzap's 1987 awards, please give the video a like. Subscribe if you're new, and check out the 1985 and 1986 episodes as well, because they show just how different this year was. Thanks for watching, guys, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, bye for now.